Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Eden. There hasn't been an Eden Daily in a very long time, and I'm glad whenever it comes up because I think Eden Dailies are just fun in general. You get to tend to experience new items that you would usually never pick up, and this daily was exactly the same. Before I touch on that, first of all, I would maybe look at the stats, and in this case they were just a little bit above average. Just the whole run, or at least the whole start, was just a little bit above average. It wasn't anything spectacular or anything super good, but our damage and our tier delay was a bit lower than usual, and the items that we got, Mystery Sack and Breath of Life, I would say, are also okay items. They're nothing maybe noteworthy, but they're okay in their regard, and that you can definitely use them in some very clutch situations. So Mystery Sack is definitely great because it does give you some consumables, some passive points for getting consumables, and also it can maybe sometimes save you a run. Maybe you can get a key out of it, or maybe a very tricky pill, and that pill can be like a damage up or a tears down. And that's all great because it does give you a lot of maybe focus, or just it can come into the clutch and give you some consumables that you really need them. So I have nothing bad to say about Mystery Sack, but definitely the star of this show, if you can call it the star, is Breath of Life. And Breath of Life is an item that a lot of people just don't even know that it exists or what it does. It's from the Angel item pool, so of course nobody really knows which items are in there. Some say that there's a Sacred Heart or Godhead in there. I personally have never seen them, so I couldn't tell you. But all seriousness aside, Angel item pool is really severely broken in some sense. The fact that special items, which are supposed to be a rare version of the items, show up more often than some of the Angel Room items. Like, I don't remember ever seeing Breath of Life in any daily, but maybe that's just because it's a forgettable item and you tend to not pick it up because you usually have a better active item. Or maybe just because it has never actually shown up. But I definitely don't remember actually encountering it and using it, and for that reason, that's also why I like Eden runs, because you tend to get these items, and in dailies especially, you try to use them the best that you can to actually get the highest score possible. So how does it work? And that's the age-old question. How does Breath of Life work? Well, in order to use it, if you don't know, in theory, it's actually one of the best items in the game because it tends to give you infinite amounts of invisibility. And the way you use it is, it's unlike any other active item. You don't just press the spacebar button to actually use it, you have to hold it down. And as you hold it down, it actually starts ticking down, or discharging, I guess, from 6, 5, 4, etc. And as soon as it hits 0 charges, you still have to hold the spacebar button down, and you're gonna be invincible for like 1 second, and then you have to let go of the spacebar item, because if you keep holding the button down, you're gonna get damaged by the item. So that sounded very confusing, but let me give you maybe a case of an example. So the way you would use this is maybe you would get in front of a blood bank, or maybe a devil dagger, or maybe a curse room or spikes or whatever, basically something that you want to circumvent without taking damage. You would stand in front of it, you would start holding it down as soon as it hits 0, so you would kind of time it because every discharge takes the same amount of time, so it would be like 3, 2, 1, 0, and as soon as it hits 0, you would still hold the spacebar button down, you would walk into the blood bank, and then you would go back and release the button immediately. And this means that you would be invincible for that very brief amount of time, you wouldn't take damage, you would have played Blood Bank and still would have gotten the coin out of it, and the item would have damaged you, and then it starts charging back up again to 6, and when it's 6 charges, you can repeat the whole process again. So you can see that this item immediately has some maybe quirks to it. The fact that it's extremely slow to actually use. You need like 8 seconds in total to actually get like a second out of invisibility out of it, and even that one brief second of invisibility doesn't really gain you anything in a lot of cases. It's just useful for maybe one play at best. I don't think you can actually get 2 plays out of it. Maybe you can if you're very good at timing, maybe you're a devil beggar, but in most cases I would definitely say that's probably a bit too hard to do on somewhat consistent basis. So you definitely have at most 1 play to get out of it, and because of it, because you tend to you have to play the Blood Bank at least a few times, or maybe the Devil Beggar, just getting the payout just by using this item is probably not realistic, at least not in most dailies, where you know that you have to get to Boss Rush or Hush. It simply just takes too much time. But in this particular case, I knew that I wasn't gonna get to Boss Rush or Hush because of how the daily turned out. I knew that I was slow, that I was too weak to actually get there, and you can see that in the 22nd minute, I'm actually only in the 4th floor. Granted, I did take like 6 minutes to play the Blood Bank to get the Ivy back, but I think I did it with a very good reason. So, how should I put this? But At a certain point in the run, I knew that I was gonna be stuck in a position where I needed to make a choice. And this is exactly the same problem I had last time. So should I make a rush for it, and should I just kind of try to get to the objectives as fast as possible and then maybe do those? Or should I kind of take my time and look at which items I have and maybe see if there's any merit in not going to those objectives? And I think in this particular daily, I had a better strategy than just actually rush and try to make it a boss rush. And just because I had Gimpy and Old Bandage, I knew that if I got Ivy Bag, that would essentially allow me to have sort of a broken combo, because every time I would have used my Ivy Bag, there was a chance I'm gonna get a Spirit Heart out of it or a Red Heart out of it. And because I have Bumbo, I'm also gonna get coins, so I can either pick up coins to get more consumable bonus, or I can leave them to Bumbo and then Bumbo can pick them up. And because Bumbo can pay out with some chests or maybe some pills or whatever, then maybe that's the way to break the game. Another reason, or maybe another item that kind of swayed me into exploring as opposed to rushing, was Mystery Sack. And essentially the logic is same. I try to explore more rooms as possible so I can actually get more payouts out of this Mystery Sack, and you never know, maybe a room that you're gonna explore just randomly is gonna contain a really good item, which is maybe gonna allow us to get to Hush. Of course, I'm not really banking on it, not at this point, because it's at the 30th minute and we essentially already missed Hush, but all in all, I feel like in this particular daily, this strategy was sane just because of how bad this run looked. And one thing that really disappointed me, I was kind of relying on Bumbo and Meat Boy in this case to kind of carry me. And they were okay against bosses. If I got close enough, they actually did target them quite well and actually did deal quite a lot of damage. But in a lot of other cases in regular rooms, they just were useless. I think I have one particular case where there was one enemy in the room. I thought that maybe because there are more enemies, they get confused, they don't really know who to target or who to hit or whatever. But in one particular instance, there was one enemy and they both went right in front of him and just watched him and just didn't do anything. And that was the most absurd thing that I actually ever saw. And for some reason, I think their petting, or just petting in general of companions or familiars, was broken to some extent, because I really think that there's no way to... I remember them being much more potent and just much more useful, but in this case, they were useless. You know, in a lot of cases, they just didn't do anything. And I feel like that's very wrong, especially for Super Meat Boy. I can understand Bumbo just getting him and just feeding him like 35 cents. It's not that big of a deal, so maybe he shouldn't be super powerful. I think he's in an okay spot, but especially Super Meat Boy. I definitely feel like Super Meat Boy is just... You need to get 4 cubes of meat, and thankfully that's a bit easier with Potato Peeler, but especially before that, getting 4 cubes of meat was really hard. You know, that was a challenge or maybe an achievement that everybody was essentially feared to do. You had to break the game if you want to get it, just because of how rare that combination was, or maybe you had to get the Book of Revelations. And when you get Super Meat Boy, you realize it would have been just much better to have maybe a level 1 or a level 2 cube of meat, just because at least that provides you with some shield and orbitals, and it just doesn't do nothing like the level 4 Meat Boy does. So all in all, you know, I was kind of disappointed with how this run worked out. I really thought that this was going to be the run where I kind of take the advantage of the items that I have, that held my situation, and I can rely on Bumbo and Meat Boy to actually carry me. And I thought it was going to be one of those unique runs where you don't really rely on your tiers to go through it, but sadly it didn't really turn out that way. Sadly, I still had to use my tears at least to some extent, and I had to focus maybe on Rubber Cement and just dodging more than I thought I would, just because of how bad their pathing is. And if you actually look at what's going on, you can see that it's really not that good. One mistake that I make wasn't really a mistake, was maybe more of an oversight, or maybe just a bit uncalculated decision, whatever you want to call it. I had a lot of health earlier, and having 4 health is okay, because that does mean that you can use the Ivy Bag a lot of times. And of course, if you have 3 red health containers, that's probably the ideal spot to be in, because that means you can kind of store up 2 particular red health containers and you can use them, and then you can get to Polaroid Invincibility just by using the Ivy Bag, and that's usually good because that means you can also dodge quite a bit of damage that's coming your way. I had 2 red health containers, which is also okay, because that means we can still use it. Obviously, with 1 or less red health containers, you can't really use the Ivy Bag. I mean, you can use it, but it takes away your Spirit Hearts instead of your red health, which is not something that you want to do, especially because I have Child's Heart. So what I did was I was the 2 red health containers. I thought it was okay, but there was experimental treatment there. And at first, I thought, why would I pick this up? It's a bad idea. But then I said, this run is already pretty weak. On weak runs, I tend to pick up experimental treatment, I think, a bit more often, because it can really have a positive impact. I did pick it up, and I think every single one of my stats except ranged increased, and that's great, obviously. But what also happened is my red health got downgraded from 2 to 1, and I was in a situation where then I couldn't use the Ivy bag anymore. So that was a bummer. It essentially means that the combo I spent so long actually trying to get, the Ivy bag and the Gimpy and all whatever and all the rest, was negated by just picking up one item. And I was in it was a weird position, because that means that my active item was useless and I was still couldn't take advantage of it. So that was, like I said, a bit of a miscalculation on my part. It's something that I forget often, that experimental treatment doesn't give you, or at least it has a chance to take the hard health away from you. I always look at it as the item that just changes their stats, and not necessarily as the item which can take or give you health, which is definitely a big component of it, and in this case, I think contributed to my death in quite a big way. Because I couldn't use maybe my invisibility, and I couldn't use the red hearts on the ground, then I wasn't able actually to get more red health or more spirit hearts via the Gimpy and what else. So I was left in this position where I had less health than I thought, and Gimpy didn't really pay out in a lot of cases when I did actually get hit, and I decided that maybe it's a good idea to take the reroll room. I did reroll my whole run, but sadly it turned out to be even worse than it was before. I thought just because of how many health up items there are in the game, at least one of the items that I will reroll into will give me a health upgrade, but that didn't happen, so I think that was maybe a bit unlucky on my part. But you can see, even though this run was super terrible, I didn't get to boss rush or hush, we still finished in the 117th place, which is just ridiculous to me. I can't imagine having such a bad run like I did and still finishing in the top 100. That's crazy. But I guess my Ivy bag play did kind of help me out in this case to actually warrant me a pretty good score in the end. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.